Edition, the next frontier for autism research. Bad roads in San Diego taking a hit on our bottom line. The new study that shows drivers picking up the tab for the rough ride.
And thousands of jobs on the line as a tech giant struggles to keep up. I'm Peggy Pico. The fallout from Qualcomm's disappointing earnings report and the possible impact for San Diego's tech industry. Plus, another playbook from LA taking on new stadium plans in San Diego. Mayor Kevin Faulconer joins us with highlights from his game plan to keep the team in town.
Think of it as Jacques Cousteau version 2.0, the underwater adventure challenging the robot engineers of the future. KPBS Evening Edition starts right now. Hi, good evening. Thanks for joining us. Bad roads in San Diego are costing drivers big bucks on car repairs. A new study shows the city ranks 8th in the nation with streets and highways in desperate need of repairs. The study comes from TRIP, a transportation research group. San Diego drivers pay more than $800 a year on vehicle expenses. 51% of roads here are considered to be in poor condition. Now, California cities take the top 3 spots on a national list where roads and pavement are riddled with problems. San Francisco Bay Area ranked number 1 with 75% of roads there in bad condition. Consumer advocates blasted California oil refineries, saying they're cashing in at the expense of drivers. The report from Consumer Watchdog found gasoline makers reporting profits up sharply over historical averages. In fact, the average for a gallon of regular in San Diego is close to $4.20. Consumer Watchdog is asking state lawmakers to intervene so the industry is more tightly regulated. Congressman Duncan Hunter of San Diego, his bill to restrict funding for sanctuary cities passed the House today, but the Obama administration is promising a veto. Sanctuary cities are where law enforcement doesn't always honor requests from federal immigration agents. Republican Hunter wrote the bill after a San Francisco woman was shot and killed earlier this month. The accused shooter is in the U.S. illegally. He was released from jail despite felony convictions and prior deportations. Falling behind on the campaign trail, Marine combat veteran Jackie Atkinson is trying to unseat San Diego Congressman Scott Peters. iNewsSource reporter Joe Girardi explains why she's having trouble fundraising.
Since Atkinson started raising money in mid-March, she's pulled in a little over $40,000. During that same period, Peters has raised more than 10 times as much for the 2016 election. Atkinson campaign manager Tommy Knepper says her low name recognition hurt her early fundraising. 2 years ago, 2014 GOP challenger Carl DeMaio raised nearly $500,000 over the same period of time. He narrowly lost to Peters. Knepper, who managed DeMaio's campaign, doesn't believe Atkinson will match DeMaio or Peters. But he says as her name has caught on, so has her fundraising. He hopes to raise as much as $300,000 this quarter. For KPBS, I'm iNewsSource reporter Joe Girardi.
2 presidential hopefuls made a campaign stop in San Diego at the Conservative American Legislative Exchange Council, or ALEC. At breakfast, Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker referenced the protest outside by organized labor and other liberal groups.
I understand you had a few protesters yesterday. For us, that's just getting warmed up. That's nothing compared to when you got 100,000 protesters.
Walker made his willingness to battle unions a centerpiece of his campaign, and former Arkansas Governor Mike Huckabee stuck to his theme of moral values before the crowd of state lawmakers.
There is no way to separate the morality of our nation from even the monetary policy and success of our nation.
ALEC has been criticized by more liberal groups for its perceived secrecy and its stances on immigration reform, labor issues, gun rights, and environmental policy. Texas Senator Ted Cruz was scheduled to speak tomorrow, but bowed out, citing a scheduling conflict. Political fireworks on and off the field. First, a possible setback for San Diego's plans to keep the Chargers in town, plus ALEC, the high-profile conference, with clashing agendas from both sides of the aisle. San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer joins Peggy Pico for more.
San Diego Mayor Kevin Faulconer, welcome back.
Great to be back. Thank you.
Well, yesterday you spoke at the American Legislative Exchange Council, or ALEC, a Republican group, I understand, of politicians, corporations, and lobbyists that are dedicated to creating and advocating for conservative policies. What did you talk about there?
I said, welcome to San Diego. It's a group of state legislators from, all across the country. Their focus is on innovation. It's something that we're pretty proud of, on the innovation that we're doing here and the reforms in San Diego. And so it was an opportunity for me to say, welcome to San Diego, and lay out, very briefly some of the things that we've been doing in terms of pension reform, a variety of other things as we're we've spent a lot of time on trying to help turn around San Diego government in a bipartisan fashion to get us back on track, and so it was great to welcome people to San Diego.
No, there were more than 1,000 demonstrators or protesters outside the conference yesterday, but ALEC attendees themselves tend to support reducing incentives for sustainable energy. Is that your position as well?
I'm a big supporter, for example, of sustainability and our climate action plan in San Diego. And we're going to have one of the most ambitious climate action plans of any city in the country. And so if folks can take away some of the great things that we're doing in San Diego, I think that's a very good thing.
Moving on to the big news yesterday, Qualcomm and the layoffs there. Nearly 1 in 3 people in San Diego's telecommunication industry actually work for Qualcomm. With this layoff of a total of about 4,700 jobs worldwide, what kind of impact could that have on San Diego's economy, our jobs, and investors here?
Well, Qualcomm is a tremendously important company to San Diego, one of our flagships, and one that we're very, very proud of. And so obviously, as they're going through some of this retrenchment, I think from their standpoint, it's designed to make sure that they continue their success. And they have 10,000 people that are here in San Diego, good quality jobs, and so we're going to continue to work with them. We're working with all of our regional partners. I mean, this is a good time for San Diego in terms of our innovation economy and the growth that we're seeing. I'm real confident that Qualcomm is going to get through this and come out much stronger for it.
Well, let's talk about the Charger Stadium for a little bit here. An LA law firm has challenged the environmental review for the new Charger Stadium in Mission Valley. And from our KPBS Facebook page, a San Diegan Norm, he asked this question of you, so we'll pass it along here. He asked, how can he, Mayor Faulconer, justify wasting $2 million on an environmental impact report for the Chargers when we need work done on infrastructure? So how would you respond to Norm?
It's not an either-or situation. I mean, one of the things that I'm very proud of is that, infrastructure is our top priority, and street repair is that we're going to be paving 1,000 miles of roads in the next 5 years. And in fact, in the budget that the council just approved, and approved unanimously, they recognize that. And I don't care what part of the city you live in, the condition of our roads. And so that's my biggest priority with our budget, and it's reflective in that. Our ability to continue to move forward with the EIR with the Chargers, again, the council passed it, supermajority, bipartisan support, is really to make sure that we're doing everything that we need to be doing as San Diegans. I'm committed to developing a plan that I think is fair, that I think will be financially responsible, and one that the voters will ultimately have the final say on. This EIR gives us that opportunity to continue to move forward. We're working directly with the NFL, so a lot of work that still needs to happen. But look, when we talk, it's not just about the Chargers. It's about San Diego State, Aztec football, the Poinsettia Bowl, the Holiday Bowl. It's important to the city of San Diego.
And you mentioned you did speak to the NFL earlier as well. What did you talk about then?
We're having ongoing discussions. It's about our ability, what we've done in San Diego. We're working well together. We have the city, we have the county, we have community support. Look, we came together as a region to build Petco Park over a decade ago. I think that's been a tremendous asset and success to San Diego. We have that same opportunity to come together, to do it right, do a fair and responsible plan with a new project in Mission Valley. I'm confident we can do that. That's the role we're talking to the NFL. A lot of hurdles still to come, but when it comes to San Diegans coming together and working together, we know how to do that very well.
All right, we have to end here. I want to get back to infrastructure because it's so important and so much of what you talk about. The backlog, though, is said to be $1.7 billion for infrastructure repairs, and your plan to complete the 1,000 miles of street repairs, which could be done in the next few years, but that could leave the city without a long-term repair budget. So how would you like to address funding for long-term infrastructure repair?
Well, we're doing it, we're really shifting the focus from what the city used to do as year to year. We're going out 5 years, saying, what are we going to be doing for the next 5 years? But even longer than that, That's why we're doing, not only our street assessments, but our sidewalks, our street lights, our facilities condition. And I'm spending a lot of time on what I like to call repairing the city's repair program, which means how are we looking at providing value for the dollars and efficiencies and making sure that we're spending the dollars that we have much more wisely and getting projects across the finish line.
All right. Unfortunately, we're out of time, so thank you for joining us.
Always great to be back, Peggy. Thank you.
Momentum is growing for calls to rename Robert E. Lee Elementary School in San Diego after a community hero. It follows a national debate about lingering symbols of the Confederacy.
Robert E. Lee was a Confederate general on the losing side of the Civil War. The Confederate flag recently came down over the state capitol in South Carolina after flying for 50 years. Supporters of the move say it represented intolerance, racism, and hatred. This was a comment from the Director of Diversity at San Diego State on Evening Edition this month.
I think it's important to take a look at symbols holistically in our country and what it means historically. And as people change, their representation of symbols changes and the meaning for them changes.
This school in Paradise Hills is known only as Lee Elementary on the district website, but as you can see, this huge billboard has its full name just outside the campus. This week, the San Diego Police Officers Union supported an effort to rename the school after an officer killed in the line of duty 37 years ago.
Our suggestion is Archie Buggs, who was a police officer that served in this community. He lived in this community, and unfortunately he was killed in this community while serving the people of southeastern San Diego.
A state lawmaker supports changing the school's name. Assemblywoman Lorena Gonzalez said, quote, "They're going to a school named after a guy who fought his own country to protect slavery. Schools should be inclusive and named after role models."
Officer Buggs was a role model. He, in fact, inspired a lot of young African Americans growing up in this community to get involved in law enforcement.
Gonzalez plans to host town hall meetings this fall with the school district to see what the public thinks.
A major funding boost for HIV research in San Diego. Scripps Research Institute announced a pair of grants worth more than $4 million to help develop an HIV vaccine. It's from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. The money will be used on tools collecting high-resolution images of HIV proteins interacting with antibodies. Scientists hope to learn more about the substances that induce immunity. An estimated 1 in every 68 children has autism. While there's lots of research about kids, there's very little about how the disorder affects adults. KPBS health reporter Kenny Goldberg says the San Diego State study may help fill in some of the gaps.
Mary and Ronan Curris look like happy-go-lucky kids. They like to play video games, eat flaming hot Cheetos, and spend time on their cell phones. But their mom, Melissa, says looks can be deceiving.
To get them looking this way has been this background of doctors and educational professionals and 3 parents, and it's taken a lot of work to get to this point.
Mary is 7 and Ronan is 5.
I'm gonna just watch a video.
They both have autism. They were diagnosed early on and have benefited from intense behavioral therapy. Curris says managing the kids requires a constant team effort from her, her husband, and her mom, who lives with the family.
Ronan.
What?
Curris says her children are socially and developmentally delayed. The bad days are rough.
2-hour-long tantrums, but it's beyond tantrum. It's like they're hysterical, something didn't go the way that they thought it should go, they get kind of fixated.
Because autism covers a wide range of impairments and disabilities, how it changes as kids age into adults isn't well understood. Autism is a brain disorder, and there's a growing amount of data that indicates there are some abnormalities in the brains of children and young adults who have it. But beyond that,
after the age of maybe 40 years or so, we don't know anything about what happens in people with autism, what happens in their brains, and how their thinking abilities might change.
Ralph Axel Mueller is a psychologist at San Diego State. He's been awarded a $3.5 million grant from the National Institutes of Health to study autism in adults. Over the next 5 years, Mueller's team will recruit 70 people with autism between the ages of 45 and 65. They'll recruit an equal number of people who don't have the disorder. Each participant will undergo a series of tests of their cognitive, language, and social skills. Researchers will take MRI scans of their brains, too. Participants will go through the same regimen 2.5 years later. Researchers will compare the results to see if there have been any changes. Mueller says that MRI scans reveal in extremely fine detail the nerve fibers that connect different parts of the brain.
And we can look at the volume of these fiber tracts and can then study across age whether the fiber tract shrinks. And that's something that would be expected in an aging brain to some extent, but you don't want this to happen too fast.
The images might also indicate whether these vital connections of the brain work differently in people with autism. SDSU neuroscientist Ruth Carper is one of the study's other investigators. She says they hope to establish a baseline of what happens in the brains of people with autism ages 45 to 65.
We'd like to have a good understanding of what are their abilities over that time period, cognitively speaking, whether or not there are differences in the structure of the brain that might explain that and correlate with that. And we'd like to have a baseline of what functional connections are there and how well they operate.
An estimated 500,000 children with autism will become adults over the next decade.
What do you want to eat?
Nuggets.
Nuggets?
It's hard for Melissa Curris to think that far ahead. She's busy getting her kids all of the help they need right now. Curris hopes it will hold them in good stead when they grow up.
You don't really know what's going to happen until they become an adult. They shouldn't regress necessarily anymore, but there's always a chance that they're not going to progress past a certain point.
Researchers say there's no indication that people with autism have a shorter lifespan. The new San Diego State study hopes to answer whether some of them are at risk for greater neurological decline as they get older.
We both got 0.
Kenny Goldberg, KPBS News.
I want these to be.
KPBS video journalist Katie Shulov helped produce that story. We may be looking at blowback for the tech industry in San Diego. That's after Qualcomm announced it will cut 15% of its workforce. Peggy Pico has analysis of the economic impact in San Diego.
About half of Qualcomm's 31,000 employees work in San Diego. Wednesday's announcements to reduce the company's workforce by 15% means about 4,700 people total will lose their jobs. Joining me with the potential impact in our region are my guest, Eric Bruvold, president of National University System Institute for Policy Research, and Alan Jin, economics professor at the University of San Diego and author of USD's Index of Leading Economic Indicators. And Eric, Qualcomm actually did decline our request for this interview, saying they had no further details. But Qualcomm is one of the largest employers here in our region. So what is Qualcomm's impact on San Diego's economy?
So we did a study that we released about 2013, which estimated that the direct economic impact, and when you add in their jobs and then the jobs that are associated with them, about 27,000 jobs in the region can be attributed to what Qualcomm does and the spending of Qualcomm employees. So it has a significant footprint here in the San Diego economy.
It sounds significant. So Alan, how big of a deal is it for a tech company this size to reduce its workforce by 15%?
15% is a big cut. That's 1 in 7 employees, and so they're going to reduce their costs by $1.4 billion. And so that will substantially help the company in terms of reducing its costs and therefore boosting its profitability.
So if they're reducing their cost, Eric, what are some of the problems that Qualcomm maybe is facing that might have led to this decision?
So there are two. One is that are those smartphones, the things that we carry around all in our pockets. Much of that market is becoming driven by price. So people are pushing more and more for those to be produced cheaply, and that's putting a constraint on Qualcomm's profitability. The second thing is that regulators in both China and Europe are looking at Qualcomm's dominant position in respect to intellectual property, and that's also putting pressure and uncertainty on the company that shareholders are reacting to.
And I understand also, correct me if I'm wrong, that companies are making their own computer chips. So things that Qualcomm used to do now, other companies are still doing it?
That's right. Again, as they're seeking to reduce the price of the cell phones that we can go into, Verizon store and AT&T and purchase. as price is becoming more important, folks are looking for those manufacturers of those handsets, looking to manufacture and produce them and to research them as cheap as possible, and that puts price pressure on a company like Qualcomm.
And Ellen, do you have anything to add to that as to why a company of this size might be shrinking?
Well, it's just the cycle in which the technology products go. I think all you need to do is go back and look at what happened to the personal computer industry. They started off as big, fancy, luxury type of items, but eventually they became really common, and that drove the price down and put a lot of pressure on companies making them.
Well, let's talk specifics here for our San Diego's regional tech industry. Do we have specifics on how many employees actually work in that sector?
So that's really the good news. So we do a measure along with Connect every quarter, and so we estimate that outside of life science and defense, there are about 95,000 people that work in the innovation economy that are outside of biotech and outside of defense. So Qualcomm's workforce is a significant chunk of that, but not nearly as dominant as, say, for example, 20 years ago, General Dynamics was in San Diego's private sector economy.
Sure, so what do you see as the fallout then?
You know, I actually don't think that we're going to be noticing that much on the regions-wide economy. First of all, Qualcomm's a very important corporate player, and I don't want to discount the uncertainty that people face. But the technology industry as a whole has seen robust job growth, lots of help wanted ads, lots of constraints in terms of the labor force. So the people that are going to be affected by this layoff are likely going to have other opportunities within San Diego or even just outside, maybe in the rest of California, where they'll be able to earn just as much.
What do you think about that, Alan? Do you agree?
Yeah, I think the problem with the loss of those jobs, they're pretty good paying jobs, and so that hurts not only the people being laid off, but it hurts the housing market, hurts restaurants, hurts retailers. And so if you take all those secondary effects into account and the people could not find replacement jobs, I estimate that it would increase the local unemployment rate by 0.3%. But as Eric indicated, right now the technology industry is doing really well. The companies are claiming that there's shortage of skilled workers, and so it could be that Qualcomm workers would have an easier time to find jobs.
Yeah, I mean, I think that this is not like the auto industry laying off or shutting down a plant in Flint, Michigan. The rest of the industry is doing so well, so that there's good expectation that those laid off people will be able to be absorbed by a constrained labor market.
All right. Professor Alan Jin and Eric Brevald, thank you so much.
Good to be here.
I'm Gwen Eiffel. On the next News Hour, how a very successful family planning program in Colorado ran out of money and the legislature refused to fund it. That's Thursday on the PBS News Hour.
New life for film noir classic, a 4K restoration of The Third Man opened Friday at Ken Cinema. KPBS film critic Beth Accomando shows us why it's cause for celebration.
No one disputes that The Third Man is a cinematic classic. But if you've seen it on TV or projected on old 35mm prints, then you might be distracted by dust, scratches, and soft focus as seen in this original trailer. But Rialto Pictures is releasing a 4K digital restoration of the film that will turn this into this and allow viewers to see a crisp image and appreciate the rich details in the shadows of this film noir classic. Purists may still want to see this projected on 35, but anyone who loves film will appreciate how gorgeous The Third Man looks with a 4K digital facelift. And this weekend, you won't find anything as good as The Third Man in theaters. At more than half a century old, it kicks ass on Avengers and dinosaurs. Beth Accomando, KPBS News.
Beth also has a new podcast out. You can listen to interviews with filmmakers and actors on the Cinema Junkie podcast on iTunes. A new space discovery found by a giant NASA telescope, Earth's older, bigger cousin, a planet called Kepler 452b. Just 1,400 light years away, scientists say it's the first planet known to be in a habitable zone. They're still learning the details, but say it might even have water on its surface. Since 2009, NASA's telescope has discovered more than 1,000 planets. Just when you thought it was safe to go back into the water, some young engineers are testing their skills at the International Robo-Sub competition in Point Loma. KPBS reporter Matt Bowler stopped by for some practice runs.
We shot 2 torpedoes, dropped 2 markers, and it was very good.
Hardeep Gadara and his team are from the Indian Institute of Technology, Bombay, in Mumbai.
This year, It's been so far the best year for us.
There are 37 teams representing schools from all over the world trying to get their submersible drones to navigate an underwater course in a massive oblong pool that's nearly 40 feet deep. Daryl Davidson from the Association of Unmanned Vehicle Systems says it's a big challenge to build a robot that works on land, but it's even harder to build one that'll work underwater.
Is your phone works perfectly well in your hand, but if you went swimming with it without a case on it, it wouldn't work so well. Water and electronics and computers don't mix.
While some teams clearly have a lot of money to spend on their robots, Jason Ploho from the San Diego City College team says money isn't everything.
If you have your mindset to it, you can do it. I mean, it may be challenging because during that week it was brutal, but we were motivated. We wanted to.
Ploho says the robotics project has helped him reach beyond what school taught him.
It's going beyond the limits of what you learn in class, because when you're in the class, it's just a bunch of snippets of stuff rather than a whole project.
Friday and Saturday are qualifying rounds, with the finals on Sunday. The competition is free and open to the public, but it's also being broadcast live online. Check out kpbs.org for more. Matt Bowler, KPBS News.
You can find tonight's stories on our website, kpbs.org/evening edition. Thanks for joining us. You have a great night.